I was just getting out of the shower when my cell phone rang. With curses, I wrapped the towel around me and hurried into the bedroom to grab it off the dresser. Darlene had already left for some last-minute Christmas shopping, and we planned to meet later at the e-consultant's office. Before I could say hello, a cheerful male voice spoke up. "Hi, Darlene, is there any chance we can meet tonight for some quick sex?" "I just can't wait 2 whole more days for you to hold me." "What the hell are you talking about?" I said angrily. A convulsive sigh was heard, followed by 2 or 3 seconds of complete silence, then a click of disconnection. Stunned, I looked at the phone. What the hell was that? After a moment, I realized it was Darlene's phone, not mine. They were the same model, but mine had a crack in the screen glass that was missing on the one I was holding in my hand. She must have grabbed the wrong phone on her way to the door. But who would be calling her looking for sex anyway? Jesus Christ, was she fucking on the side? It looked that way. Stunned, I hung up the phone, went back into the bathroom, and wiped myself down, my thoughts racing. All I could think was, this can't be happening. Darlene and I have been married for 6 years. By mutual agreement, we have no children, and the last few months have been pretty rough. We still got along, and she still loved me, of course, but her interest in sex had all but disappeared. From 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes at least at her initiative, we had dwindled to once or twice a month, and even then only at my insistence. And when we did have sex, she was passive and unenthusiastic, not the passionate and enthusiastic partner she had been at the beginning of our marriage. We talked about the problem over and over again. Darlene kept telling me that it wasn't anything special, she was just tired, overly busy at work, blah, blah, blah. Except that nothing had changed at her job. No big projects, no horrible deadlines, no promotions. Every time I brought it up, Darlene would reply that she was feeling better, and occasionally that night we made love, but it quickly came back to the same thing. I ask, she denies. By the end of September, I was sick of it, and that evening after dinner, I sat her down on the couch. "Darlene, I love you, but I'm not ready to go on like this. I don't want to go the rest of my life without sex. You used to love having sex with me, and now you obviously don't anymore. Something has to change, or I'm filing for divorce." She looked at me, completely stunned. "Divorce? Jesus, honey, isn't that a little drastic? Darlene, do you know how bad it is?" I decided to find out. We've had 3 quickie hookups in the last 3 months, plus making love once. That's 4 times since the 1st of July, and in that time you've turned me down 18 times. I'm not going to live like this anymore. She looked under her feet, obviously feeling very uncomfortable. "Baby, I'm sorry. You know that I love you, and I can do better, and I will, I promise. I'm just so tired." "That's not good enough, Darlene. I want 2 promises from you, or I'm going to see a lawyer on Monday." She looked at me warily, and I continued. "First, I want you to see Dr. Evans and get a full examination to make sure there are no physical problems. And second, I want us to start seeing a marriage counselor." "Marriage counselor? But we didn't have anything bad happen." "Yes, we did. Are you listening to me, Darlene? We're practically living together like brother and sister. Whether you want to admit it or not, something did go wrong, and we either try to fix it or I'm leaving." A long argument ensued, full of Darlene's tears, but I was adamant, and finally got my way. She met with Dr. Evans, who confirmed her complete health, and we started meeting once a week with Eileen Archer, a counselor recommended by our friends Brad and Allison, who had worked with her a couple of years ago. We counseled for about 2 months, and things were going well, or at least I thought so. We talked a lot about our relationship, about everyone's jobs, about the families we grew up in, and what our parents' marriages were like. Some of it seemed boring or inappropriate, but Eileen was sure we'd made progress, even though life in our bedroom hadn't improved from it. So far, we had talked more about relationships and how we got out of bed rather than sex. Eileen's slogan for me was, "Be patient," and for both of us, "Be honest with yourself and your partner." Now, standing in the bedroom, staring at Darlene's phone as if a snake had crawled out of it, I had to wonder. Had I just discovered the real reason she no longer wanted to spa with me? Was it that simple? Had I been replaced? Someone else stepping in and fulfilling the role of traditional husband? As far as I could see, nothing had changed in Darlene's schedule. She no longer worked late, didn't go on mysterious shopping trips or dates with the girls, didn't come home flushed and disheveled and run straight to the shower. But that didn't mean she wasn't sleeping with some asshole, she just did it with care. I picked up her phone and checked calls received, and to my surprise, there was only one call there, the one I had just answered. The caller was identified as CM. I pressed answer and waited until it went to a dial tone. Not surprisingly, the guy didn't dare pick up and the call was transferred to voicemail. "This is Chris Mason. Leave a message and I'll get back to you. Have a good day." I hung up the phone. I recognized the name. He was another employee at the brokerage firm where Darlene worked, but in some other division. She had mentioned him to me once or twice, but I had never met him. I checked Darlene's cell phone more thoroughly. Not only had all previous received calls been deleted, but also the missed and sent call lists. Who would take the time to delete all that? Darlene was obviously covering her tracks. I headed for the office, looking for cell phone and home phone statements for the past few months. The bills were paid by Darlene, so I never had any reason to look for them. In the desk, I found all of our home phone bills, but a search revealed no calls from Chris Mason, or at least not from his cell phone. But cell phone records for the past 8 months were missing. I looked in the checkbook and all the cell phone bills were paid, so Darlene must have hidden or thrown away the receipts, no doubt because they showed calls to Chris Mason. I arrived at Eileen's office about 20 minutes early. Darlene's car wasn't in the parking lot yet, so I sat down and thought for a while. If I was right, if Darlene was cheating on me with Chris Mason or anyone else, our marriage was over. She may love me, but it's not worth a damn if she's spreading her legs for someone else. I assume she loved me. Otherwise, why would she want to stay together? Why bother seeing a counselor besides seemingly lying to both the counselor and me? But if she thought she could eat fish well, she'd have to find out she was completely wrong. I thought at first to meet Darlene in Eileen's office today, share the contents of the call from Chris and demand an explanation, but realized that wasn't enough for me. I wanted proof, and then I wanted to spectacularly end our marriage by rubbing Darlene's nose in it. I was angry and hurt, and she should pay for what she'd done to me. And I had a much better place in mind for our final confrontation than Eileen's office. So I went inside, and a short time later Darlene showed up, kissed me, and we went into a meeting. Eileen got us talking about the usual nonsense, about how we handled arguments in our relationship, and whether the difference in styles was based on our experiences in how our parents argued, etc. I played along, looked thoughtful and serious, tried to give plausible answers, and managed not to grit my teeth too hard. That damn bitch! I wanted to grab her by the throat and strangle her right in front of Eileen. Toward the end of the session, Eileen gave me a chance to get one good reason to tease, even if only lightly. She said something like, "I know this is hard for both of you, but gradually we're learning about your marriage, about each of your expectations for it, and your honesty is actually fostering an atmosphere where we can move the conversation from general to productive discussion of your sexual issues as well." I interjected to say, "Thank you for saying that, Eileen. It's been difficult for me at times, but I've tried to be completely honest and forthright. It seems to be the only way to accomplish anything. Darlene, would you say that this is true for you as well?" I watched her as she blushed slightly and avoided my eyes. Instead, she looked at Eileen, nodded, and said, "Absolutely, Alan, I feel the same way." I wondered if Eileen had noticed Darlene's obvious discomfort. She didn't comment on it, but I thought she looked at Darlene intently for a moment or two. After the session, we walked across the street to a diner for a quick lunch. When she went to the ladies' room, I quickly took my cell phone out of her purse and put it in my pocket. I then went outside to buy a newspaper from a vending machine, and while there, I turned off Darlene's cell phone, wrapped it in newspaper, and stuck it in the bottom of the trash can. I figured that Chris Mason would be frantically trying to contact Darlene to let her know what had happened, so I was going to make sure he never had a chance to get to her. During lunch, Darlene and I chatted about nothing. Mostly about her shopping and what gifts we would still need the next day when we were going to her parents' house for Christmas dinner. We made a list of what we needed and then went to a row of crowded stores to buy the last few items. I was amazed at my ability to keep my mouth shut, to pretend to be nice when all I wanted to do was hit her. But either I was a better actor than I thought, or Darlene was too distracted, but she didn't notice that anything was wrong. At home, the corded phone rang 3 times during dinner, and each time I jumped up to pick it up. The first 2 were just silence. The third time, about 20 minutes later, a female voice I had never heard before asked, "May I speak to Darlene, please?" I wondered if Chris, in desperation, had hired some friend to give Darlene a message from him and said, "Can I ask who's calling?" A voice answered, Iris, from work." Smiling to myself, I said, "What's to refer to?" She was stumped. There was a short silence, and then she said, "Oh, well, there's an account we're both working on, and I have a couple questions about it." "On Christmas Eve," I said, "I'm afraid she can't come to the phone right now, but I'll be sure to give her a message. Have a good evening." And I hung up the phone with a smile. Darlene looked at me questioningly when I returned, and I said, "Some lady is taking a survey. Can you believe them calling on Christmas Eve?" I could tell that Darlene was a little concerned. She waited a few minutes, then casually walked out into another room, no doubt checking her cell phone. She returned with her purse and looked concerned. "Darling, do you have any idea where my cell phone might be? I remember taking it off the dresser when I went out this morning." "Gee, Darlene, I have no idea. It's not in your purse? Did you look by your car? Or maybe you left it somewhere at the mall?" She went and searched the car, but to no avail, and I sat there smiling. Eventually, she gave up, and I promised to get her a new one as a New Year's present. Don't count on it, honey, I thought to myself. I'm sure her next move would have been to try to call Chris if she could get rid of me for even a few minutes. Several times throughout the evening, I noticed Darlene watching me with the corner of her eye. I wondered if she was hoping for a chance to get to the phone. Finally, she said, "Honey, I'm a little tired. I'm going to go upstairs and just watch TV for a while, okay?" "Sure, Darlene," I replied. "That actually sounds wonderful. I'll just put the dishes in the sink and we'll go together." She smiled at me, but I could see she was annoyed. An hour later, she asked me to check that there were no trash cans at the curb. When I reminded her that tomorrow was Christmas and there was no pickup, she turned away from me with obvious disappointment. When we went to bed, she didn't get a chance to call anyone. Christmas morning, I got up early, ate breakfast while Darlene slept and made a few preparations, then went into the bedroom and gently woke her up. "Good morning, dear. Merry Christmas." I gave her a fake smile. "There's coffee ready in the kitchen. I'm off. I'll see you later at your parents' house." She sat down awkwardly. "It's only 8:30, Alan. Where are you going?" I smiled again. "I need to pick up a last-minute gift for you, dear. But don't worry, I'll see you there at 2. She protested, saying, "Weren't all the stores closed today? And couldn't I come home later and pick her up?" But I was already on my way to the door, sending her a kiss. At 8:45, I knocked on Chris Mason's apartment door, having found his address in Darlene's service directory. I was counting on him being in town today, as he had mentioned that he was looking forward to seeing Darlene the next day. When he opened the door, he was dressed in a robe and looked sleepy. A tall, not bad-looking guy, about 25 or so. "Yeah, what the hell?" He stopped talking and retreated to his living room, and I walked in and quickly closed the door behind me. I was holding a Hammerly 208C air pistol aimed directly at his chest. It wasn't such a deadly weapon, just something I used for short-range practice, but Mason clearly didn't know that. He looked absolutely terrified. "Let me introduce myself, Chris. I'm Alan Rohatton, Darlene's husband, your current sexual partner." His eyes widened, and he took another step back. "Hey, kid, calm down, okay? I don't know what you're—" "Anyway, Chris, you called yesterday asking for sex. Do you really think I can't figure out what's going on? Now here's what's going to happen. We're going to sit here in your living room and have a nice chat. If I don't get the answers I want, I'll shoot you once or twice in the balls and leave you to bleed to death. If you decide to be more responsive, after a while we'll visit some people I know and talk to them, and then I'll leave you to live your life, understand?" He looked at me cautiously, nodding his head slightly. "All I have to do is talk to you." I nodded. "Uh-huh. And I'll leave you alone. Damn bad if you get shot, isn't it?" Chris and I chatted for a while, and he told me everything I wanted to know. I then supervised him as he got his clothes and took them into the bathroom to shower and get dressed. After that, he made us sandwiches in his kitchen and we ate. I kept the gun pointed at him the whole time. We didn't talk much, but that was good for me. At 1:45, we went out and got in my car. I gave Chris the address and told him to drive while I myself sat in the back seat with the gun in my hand. When we got to Darlene's parents' house, I had Chris park 4 houses away so they couldn't see my car. I noticed that Darlene's car was already there, along with the car that belonged to her sister Barbara and her husband. But I wanted to make an impressive entrance, so we sat and waited until 2, 30 before I got Chris out of the car and walked him to their driveway. "No games now, got it, Chris?" I asked. "Do you remember the arrangement? We go in, I make a few introductory remarks, you tell your story, and I leave. And you save your testicles. I'll have my gun in my pocket, but it'll show up in less than 1 second if you do some shit to me." He looked somewhere between like he was uncomfortable and wildly terrified. "Don't worry, man, I'll play it just like you said." When we rang the doorbell, Darlene's mom, Sarah, opened the door. Her welcoming smile turned into a perplexed one when she saw Chris. "Hi, Alan. Who's this?" "Hi, Sarah, Merry Christmas," I said, kissing her on the cheek as we entered the foyer. "This is Chris. He's only here for a few minutes." Ignoring her confusion, I took Chris by the hand and led him straight into the dining room where the family was just about to start appetizers. Apparently, they were going to start without me. "Merry Christmas, everyone," I said with a happy smile, looking at the surprised faces. Darlene's father, Tom, was sitting there, and her sister Barbara and her husband Mark and their 2 boys, Teddy and Ben. Farther back sat Darlene. There was a vague but pleased, even anticipatory expression on everyone else's face. Here's a nice surprise, they thought, an extra guest. But Darlene looked as pale as a ghost. Her mouth opened a couple of inches, and I thought she might faint. "Attention, everyone, this is Chris. He is Darlene's co-worker, and he has a little story to tell us." "Come on, Chris!" Darlene has risen to her feet. "No, Alan, it's not." I quickly interrupted her. "It's okay, Darlene. I think everyone needs to hear this." She took a few quick steps toward the door, but I grabbed her arm and hugged her tightly. "Come on, Chris." Darlene tried to free herself from me by saying, No, Chris, don't." I put my free hand over her mouth to silence her while her parents looked on in utter amazement. Chris reluctantly began to speak. "Darlene and I were having an affair. It started in April and has been going on ever since." Darlene's family awed, then stared at Chris, then at Darlene and me. After a long pause, Barbara lifted Teddy and Ben out of their chairs and pushed them into the living room where she turned on the TV, then returned and closed the door behind her. "Go on, Chris," I smiled. "We've been seeing each other at work. The fitness center has several massage rooms with doors that can be locked. We do this about twice a week, meeting at different times, so no one has noticed a pattern. We work on different floors of the building, so no one realized we were leaving at the same time. There are showers where we clean up afterward." Darlene continued to fight me. She tried to bite my arm, but I held her firmly. "And Chris," I said, "what exactly did you 2 do together? Please be specific." He didn't meet my eyes. "We mostly fucking—" I loved the look of horror on Darlene's mother's face. Darlene stopped struggling with me, and I took my hand away from her mouth. She just stood there, tears streaming down her face. "And what was it like sleeping with Darlene?" I asked affably. I knew what his answer would be. I'd made him practice a couple times to make it smooth. She's very hot. Always very proactive. She tenses her hips, wiggles her hips at me, especially when she's getting close to coming. She says things like, 'I need your buddy. I need that thing inside me.' To my surprise, Darlene's relatives still hadn't moved. I expected one of them to try to put an end to this. She likes the 69 pose best. She tries to get me to finish before I can get her to finish, but I usually win, and she really likes the doggy style." "Does she ever talk about me?" I asked. "Sometimes. She says she loves you, but she doesn't want to stop sleeping with me." "When were you planning to meet next time?" "Tomorrow. She was going to tell you that she had to work at the office. We planned to be together for about 3 hours. We were looking forward to having more time this time. She said she was going to fuck me so hard my eyes would pop out of my orbits, that she was going to fuck me so hard I wouldn't even be able to walk." "And how long do you think this affair will last?" he said. "Probably a few more weeks. I'd be happy to continue, but Darlene said it's time to stop. She said you insisted on counseling because your sex life had taken a huge downturn, and she was worried about you figuring out what was going on. She said New Year's Day would be the day you broke up with me, but then laughed and said it might take her a few weeks to follow through." There was silence in the room while Darlene's family looked on in shock. Me, Darlene, Chris, all standing. Darlene was sobbing, covering her face with her hands, not trying to say anything. I walked over to Tom. took his hand and shook it. Bye, Tom. I loved being your son-in-law. You and Sarah are good people, and you deserve better as a daughter than that cheating whore. Of course, I deserved better for myself as a wife than she did, too. I went to Sarah, kissed her on the cheek, and said, Bye, Sarah. I'm sorry. I'm not staying for lunch. This might be a little awkward. Darlene fell to the floor. She was still crying, just sitting there and covering her face with her hands. I leaned over and said, Don't come home tonight, Darlene. Your things will be packed up outside the garage by tomorrow morning, and I'll change the locks. And do not, I repeat, do not try to talk to me. You won't say anything that I want to hear. She looked up at me, lines of flowing mascara crossing her face. Alan, darling, I said no. Without another word, I turned back to the table, smiled, and headed for the door, waving to everyone. Chris had the good sense not to ask me for a ride home.